Halcyon Spooled File Manager is our easy-to-use spool file distribution and archiving product. The comprehensive real-time monitoring and filtering options allow for automatic distribution, archiving and alerting. In this short overview, I'll show you a very simple process to automate the archiving of spool files and a few other features. Now, to set up a new filter, I first need to go into the Work with Spool Files Filters menu, press Enter, and we're presented with two options. Now we have two types of filters. These are distribution and others are the alerting filters. So I'm going to pop into distribution. Now the filters are further broken down into output queue. Now this allows for a more granular control over how your spool files are managed. In this case I'm going to go into queue print and I'm going to press F6 to create a new filter. Now we first need to give it a sequence number and description. On the same screen we can control the time range the filter is active and also which days the filters are going to be running. Once you're happy with the settings, press Enter. Now here we can control the selection criteria for what spool files we'd like to perform actions upon. Now we can be very specific and say that all spool files that have a specific name will be selected, or perhaps spool files from a single job to be selected. In this example I'd like to control all spool files that have been on our system for over 90 days. So I'm going to select that in the number of days in system and press Enter. So we now will move on to the action we'd like to perform with our selected spool files. On this screen, if we press F4, we can get a list of the actions we are available. I'll just explain a couple of these. The first one, copy, allows you to duplicate the spool file to another output queue. Send will send the spool file to another system I. Archive I'll come back to because that's the action I'd like to take. Email further down, we'll email the spool file as an attachment in either PDF, text or HTML, and the final option on the screen, PDF, will convert the spool file to PDF and then save the file within a folder on your IFS. Now for this example I'd like to archive all of our spool files over 90 days, so I'll take Archive and press Enter. So you now need to select the archive file and library. Now these will be pre-selected based upon the default settings. So in this case the file will be placed into the archive file QPrint in library HSM archive. Now the final option to note on this page is the spool file option, which is currently set to *leave. Now I'm going to select this as *delete, as I'd like to archive the spool file then remove it once the process is complete. Once you're happy, press Enter and the filter has now been created. So this will now start archiving any spool files that are on the system and on output queue QPrint for over 90 days. Now I also mentioned we have alerting filters, which is back on this screen, so I'll quickly pop into here and just show you a few of the different types of filters that are available to us. So again, output queue filters are broken by output queue, so I'm going to take QPrint and work with the filters here. Again, we need to press F6 to create a new filter. Likewise, we also need to give this filter a sequence number and description. The additional option on this screen is the type or threshold value. Now this allows us to control what type of filter we're going to create. Now the first is a spool file filter, which is actually pre-selected. This looks for the existence of a specific spool file using very similar criteria to those we saw on the distribution filter. Now this gives us the addition of a page count option, so we can allow you to look for spool files over a specific size that get placed onto the output queue in question. Once those are done, we can then perform the actions which we'll see on a later screen. The next type of filter we can create is a spool file count filter. This will alert you if the output queue grows beyond your predetermined spool file filter level. In this case we can go from either 1 to 100,000 spool files on your output queue before the filter is triggered. The final type is an output queue status filter. Using this we can be alerted if the output queue or the associated writer gets held or stopped. I'm going to select that as the type and just continue on through this filter. Again, we have the same kind of controls over the time range and which days the filter is going to be active. Okay, onto the second screen, we need to select the default status of the output queue. In this case, QPrint is normally in the release state, so I'll leave the default as released. The second option on the screen allows the associated writer to be monitored along with the output queue. Now I'll leave it as star no check, as I only wanted to monitor the output queue in question. So I'll leave star no check and press enter. So finally, we need to select the action the filter is going to take. I'll press F4 to bring up the list, as it is slightly different to the actions we saw when we were looking at the distribution filters. Just to pick out a few of these, for example, console. This will send the alert to the Halcyon Enterprise console. Now this can either be a Windows-based enterprise view of all the alerts, or perhaps a system-wide native view, so a green screen console. Page will send a text message to a mobile phone or a pager. That's as long as you're using the Halcyon Message Communicator application on the System I. Email. This will send an email from the System I to alert you that the threshold that you've preset has been breached. The action I'm actually going to take for this one is going to be a command action. So I'll take command and press enter. Now, as this filter is looking for the output queue being in the held state, or not released state, should I say, I'm simply going to take an action to release the output queue of qprint and press enter. So that filter is now active, so if for any reason qprint moves away from the release state, then that filter will be triggered instantly and will straight away release the filter for me. So those are the different types of automatic filters we can create. So those are constantly monitoring in real time. Perhaps you might want to use manual controls over some of your filters, or over some of your spool files, sorry. So we have Halcyon equivalents of some of your standard IBM menus and screens you perhaps normally use to control your spool files. For example, the IBM Work with Spool File command, we have a Halcyon equivalent, which is option 20, Work with Spool Files. So from here we have the ability to use the Halcyon actions over any of the spool files perhaps you have on the system. For example, if I wanted to simply email one of the spool files to myself, I could take option 15 against one of the spool files, fill in my email address, subject, and the message body. Now, alongside the filters, we have 3 different types of emails that can be sent. This will be the attachment in either PDF, text, or HTML file attachments. So once you're happy, press enter, and the spool file will be emailed. Likewise, to manually archive one of our selected spool files, simply take option 9 against the spool file. Now again, we need to specify where the file will be archived to. In this case, we're looking at the Steve output queue. So the file will be placed into the Steve archive file in library HSM archive. Again, we have the same controls over what will happen to the archive file when it's been archived, sorry, the spool file when it's been archived. So we'll press enter, and that will manually go away and archive our spool file. In the reverse of that, perhaps you would now like to restore the spool file. We simply need to go into the Work with Archive Files screen, select the output queue or archive file that we'd like to restore from, and there we can see the file we previously archived. Now from here we can either perhaps display the spool file, we can delete it from the archive file, or in this case we'd like to retrieve it. So in here we can either specify the defaults, which is going to restore the file to the same output queue we archived it from, or perhaps you'd like to overwrite that of an output queue of your choosing. Any of the other options you can see there can be manually changed just to give you much greater controls over what you were going to be restoring. Once you're happy, press enter, and the archived spool file will be retrieved. That's pretty much all I'd like to show you here, so I hope this demo has been informative in showing you a handful of the features available in the Halcyon Spooled File Manager application, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.